how do you know that God exists? And if He exists, where did He come from? How could any logical, reasonable adult believe in the existence of God? Hi, I'm Luke Krell, and those are some very good questions, and I hope to give you the answer to them and some other deep questions to ponder in the next few minutes. Before I can really delve into answering those deep questions, we have to establish a common ground, a common understanding, a common platform for the way we reason and the way we make truth claims. So I want to define for you what I mean by logic when I speak of logic or logical reasoning. I also want to define for you what I mean by the law of nature, the law of causality. So I hope you'll bear with me the next few minutes as I try and establish a chain of reasoning for you so you understand where I'm coming from and where I am going. Firstly, I want to start out and look at what I mean when I talk about logic. And I hope you can reason with me to look back and try and see if you can understand where I'm coming from and if we can agree on a common definition of logic. To start, I want to look back and think back to an earlier time. I want to hypothesize for you about the first thought of humanity. I want you to think about a baby as he emerges from his mother's womb. What thought do you think the baby first thinks? I would submit to you that every human being has first thought this thought: I sense. Now, a baby might sense hunger, might sense pain, might sense cold. The baby is not exactly sure what it is sensing, but the baby is sure that it is sensing. And when I make the claim, I sense, what I am doing is I am making a truth claim about the nature of sensing. I am claiming that truth exists. If I say that I sense, I am claiming that truth exists, that sensing is different from not sensing. I am making a distinguishment between reality and between falsehood. So I want to submit to you that the very first foundation of reason is logic, and humans are born with this idea that truth exists. And I will define logic for you as the idea that truth exists, that truth is not falsehood, that falsehood is not truth, and that truth and falsehood are distinguishable. Now, of course, we as humans are unable always to understand and to distinguish truth from falsehood, but that doesn't mean that they exist as one. The importance is that you and I both agree that truth exists and that truth is not falsehood. And that's what I mean by logic. And that's an idea I think we all humans need in order to reason at all, to understand, to think, to make claims about anything. We have to agree and understand that truth exists. And when I talk about logical reasoning, I call logical reasoning the process by which I remove falsehood from my belief system. So when I talk about logical reasoning, I am asking you to take a look at your ideas and compare them, and if they are incompatible, we know that they cannot both be true, because truth is not equal to falsehood. And in reality, two things that cannot coexist cannot both be true. And we have to remove falsehood from our thinking. If two ideas I hold are incompatible, one of them must be false. And that's an idea, a basis for reasoning that we need to establish going forward. So now that I have defined for you logic, I want you to go back with me to this first thought I have hypothesized to be the original thought of human beings. And this first thought, I sense, I will insert for our purposes the word hunger. This thought, I sense hunger, is a thought that I believe almost all human beings have. Of course, there may be some children who don't live to think or realize that sensation, but every human being that has lived in this world for more than just a few minutes has understood that they sense hunger. And now humans, as they grow, as the baby grows, he begins to realize something. He begins to realize that when he eats, he becomes no longer hungry. That eating is the cause of his satisfaction. That eating causes him to be no longer hungry. There is an effect to his eating, and that there is a cause and effect going on here. Now, we also can apply this idea to our other basic thoughts. I am sleepy. I sense that I am tired. So we find out, though, after a while, that sleeping is what relieves us of our tiredness. And we realize that there is a cause and an effect. And throughout history, man has recognized this pattern that causes have effects, and that effects come from causes. And we begin to establish this idea, this pattern, that we recognize that effects come from causes. And as we see that effects come from causes, we are interested and we're curious to produce desired effects. So we experiment, and that is how we learn, that is how we grow, that is how our understanding of the universe around us increases. We have learned about gravity, we've learned about the law of gravity, as we have called it. We see the effect of objects falling to the ground, and we hypothesize a cause, and then as we test it, we are able to more firmly lay a claim to the cause. And this is really the basis, the heart of the scientific method. We hypothesize on either a cause or an effect, and then we test our hypothesis. This is really the heart of science. It's a guess and a check. We guess or we hypothesize a cause or an effect, and then we check that through experimentation. We guess and we check. We look for a cause and an effect, or we see an effect and we look for the cause. And I will say that this law of causality, this cause and effect, is indeed the base law of nature. When I speak of the law of nature, I am thinking of our scientific laws, like the law of gravity, or the law of thermodynamics, or the law of conservation of energy. And I think that really all of those tie back to this understanding of cause and effect. They're all productions of the law of causality. So I call the law of causality the base law of nature, or the law of nature. So over human history, we have used this base law of nature, the scientific method, this guess and check, this search for a cause and effect, and we've used it to understand the world around us. All of our medical breakthroughs, all of our engineering breakthroughs, everything that we love about technology comes from this idea and comes from this principle, this law of causality. And so, throughout history, humans have been unable, oftentimes, to understand a cause or an effect. And so, over history, for example, many different societies could explain no cause for the rising and setting of the sun. So what happens is human beings have classified those things for which a cause or effect was unknown. They called these things supernatural, because they superseded the law of causality, the law of nature. So people would deify the sun. They would speak of it as a god, as being supernatural, because they didn't understand the cause or the cause of the way it operated. And there were many things that were deified on this basis. Throughout human history, however, we have continued to learn, continued to experiment, and continued to grow. Till the things that we once deified as supernatural, we have been able to see a cause. We have been able to understand the pattern of cause and effect. And many of those things we deemed supernatural, we have found, are actually indeed subordinate to the law of nature, the law of causality. So our understanding of the supernatural has shrunk the term, shrunk it down minusculely to the point where many people today would completely eliminate the term supernatural and would say that all things must fall under the law of causality. They must fall under the law of nature. This is to the point where many people ridicule the idea of a supernatural entity, period. It seems unreasonable or unintelligent to many people. But this video here today I have wanted to put this out to tell you why I believe it is important and logically necessary for us to leave the door open for one area, one category of the supernatural to be possible, and not only possible, but be necessary. And so I hope you'll follow me, my following reasoning, to understand why I say that there is something we must still reserve the title of supernatural for. So I will start with a simple premise, and I hope that you will allow it for me. I will start with the premise that I exist. Perhaps there's some who would debate me on this, and I'm not really interested in tangling with that crowd at this time. But I hope that you will grant me that I exist. Now, granting that I exist, I want to explore the possibility, the idea, do I have a beginning? Now, obviously, logic would dictate that I must either have a beginning or not have a beginning. Truth being different from falsehood, these are two incompatible ideas, the idea that I have a beginning and the idea that I don't have a beginning. So either or is true, not both. So I want to look at the possibility that I have no beginning. Well, when I say that I do not have a beginning, what I am asserting is that I experience no sequence. Never has a first activity occurred. Instead, rather, any events that I experience are all simultaneous. So if there's the idea that I do not experience sequence in my life. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that my life does contain sequence. Perhaps you want to argue that point, but I trust you're too intelligent to do so. Yesterday, I went to church, and then I went swimming, and now today I played tennis, and I've gone to work, and now I'm recording this video. My life does contain sequence. So I recognize that I cannot be a both sequential and non-sequential being because that is incompatible. That is logically impossible. So one of the two is true, one of the two is false, but both must be true if I were to be a being without beginning. So I recognize by logic that I have a beginning. That's not even looking at my experience or my knowledge of where babies come from, but I do recognize from experience that I have a beginning. But even if I did not, was unable to arrive at that through experience, I would know by logic that I have a beginning. So anyhow, I know I have a beginning, and I happen to know where babies come from. And I know, in my case, that I came from my parents. But even if I didn't know that, I want to logically ask myself the question, is it possible that I exist without cause? Is it possible that I exist in a supernatural way? Well, there's two options regarding my cause. Either I am caused or I am uncaused. If I am uncaused, I know that I am a supernatural being. Any being that exists without cause would have to be, by definition, outside the law of causality and would have to be supernatural. So anything that does not have a cause is supernatural. Now I happen to believe that I am not supernatural in my existence, but that I indeed came from my parents. I had a cause, and I know where babies come from. So I look back to this cause, the cause of my parents, and I say, okay, I'm interested about my parents. Let me plug them into this whole little algorithm I have created here. Do my parents have a beginning, or did they not have a beginning? Okay, well, if they had a beginning, then either they were caused or they were uncaused. And I'm able to trace them back to my grandparents. And so now I look at my grandparents and I run them through the same test. Do they have a beginning? Okay, yes, they do have a beginning. Alright, do they have a cause? Well, I am able to trace them back even further to my great-grandparents. Now, before too very long, I would run into the problem of not being able to trace the chain. I know that I only know back so many generations of Krells, but at any point I recognize that if I concede that a cause that led up to me was uncaused, then that cause in and of itself is supernatural. If I ever admit a cause to be uncaused in its existence, I am admitting the existence of the supernatural. So anyhow, I look at this and I recognize, there is a series of events that have led to my existence. I may not be sure exactly what they are, but I want to plug in a series and take this series of events that led to my existence and run the entire series through this test. So I plug it in, and if it is a series of events that experience a sequence, which I know it does, then it must have a beginning. So I take that and I ask, now is this series caused or uncaused? Well, I'm trying to look at the entire series of events, so by definition the entire series would have to be uncaused, or else it is not a series of events, but only a partial series of events. So I recognize that this series of events leading to my existence must logically have begun with a supernatural event or a supernatural entity. Now, if it offends you, I don't want to necessitate that you make the push that I do. I will call this uncaused first cause, this supernatural event, I will call it God. Now, I have other beliefs about God tied to Christianity, which I will not in any way try to prove to you in this video. But at this point, I want you to recognize and to realize that in order for you to exist, we have to grant that something supernatural must have existed at some point in time. This supernatural being or entity or substance or whatever is necessary if you truly exist today. And that's what logic tells us. Now, the whole purpose of this video series that I am creating is that I want to express to you Christianity because I believe it to be true. And I want you to come to a place where you embrace Christianity, but only if you are convinced that it is true. I want you to use your mind. I want you to use logical reasoning. I want you to use the intellect I believe God gave you to discover whether or not it is true. In this world today, we believe a lot of things, often for reasons outside of truth. But today I want to tell you that seeking truth is what's important, and that is why I want you to listen to what I have to say about Christianity. I want you to use your mind. I want you to check me. I want you to challenge me if you see that I'm saying something that is untrue, that is logically contradictory. I don't want to believe falsehood. I don't want to speak falsehood. I want to believe truth, and I want you to understand Christianity because I believe it to be true. And I want you to use your mind to see, is it true? I believe many people have used their mind in a proper way, in that logic tells us that if something cannot be true, it is not true. And that is a valid argument a valid thought process if we are correct in understanding whether or not something could be true. Now, I believe there are many people today who have rejected Christianity in favor of atheism because they believe the existence of the supernatural to be logically impossible. But I hope this video has proved to you that no, the supernatural having existed is logically necessary, and it is truth in of itself. Whether or not Christianity is true or not, I can truly say to you that it is 100% proven that something supernatural has existed. And that's what I hope you will admit today, and I hope you will bring your mind along with you and your logical reasoning to see, could this be true? And then finally examine evidence for, is this true? First we ascertain, could something be true? Secondly, we follow up to see, is it true? And we view the evidence. So I hope today you understand what I mean when I talk about the supernatural. And I believe, and I will call God is the uncaused first cause of the universe, the uncaused first cause leading to your existence. And there's no other real characteristic of God that I'm hoping you'll agree with me based on this video. But I hope we can all see and agree that something supernatural was the uncaused first cause of my existence. Thank you for watching this video. I hope to release a few others in the near future. First up, I'm going to talk about free will. What do I mean by free will? Is that a logical possibility? Could human beings really have free will? That's a good question, and that's a video I want to tackle, a question I want to tackle in the next video. In the meantime, if you want to talk to me, you can send me a message on Facebook, or you can email me at lukekrell@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching. You have a good day.